You got a 58, 59, 60, or 62 on an NBME, and your Step 1 exam is coming up in 2 weeks. So now you're asking the question every student asks at this point: should I postpone? And the honest answer is maybe, but not just because of the number. Hi, I'm Mike, the founder of MD Steps, and today we're going to go over what to do if you've got some flat or bad NBME deltas and you're sitting for your exam in just a few weeks. A borderline NBME score does not mean the same thing for every student. Two students can both score 59%, and one may be a few targeted fixes away from being ready, while the other may be taking on real test day risk. So in this video, I want to show you how to think about your NBME score the right way. Not emotionally, not by panic scrolling on Reddit, and definitely not by comparing yourself to someone who says, "I got a 58 and passed." Because that story may be true, but it doesn't tell you whether your pattern is safe. The real question isn't, is 59% good or bad? The real question is, what kind of 59 is this? Let's break that down. First, you need to understand that your NBME score is not just a score. It's a risk signal, and risk depends on the pattern. A single low NBME after a bad night of sleep is very different from 3 NBMEs in a row sitting in the same range. A score drop after doing too much is different from a score drop because you keep missing the same clinical reasoning pattern. So let's talk about the 3 broad zones. These are not official rules, they are not guarantees, they are a practical way to think about risk. If you are repeatedly scoring in the low to mid 50s, that is usually a high risk pattern. If you're in the high 50s or low 60s, that is the danger zone. This is where students struggle the most emotionally. Because you are not clearly failing, but you are also not clearly safe. And if you're consistently in the mid to high 60s, especially with an improving trend, that is more reassuring. A 61 that came after a 54 and then a 58 may mean you are improving. A 61 that came after a 65 and then a 62 may mean you are slipping. A 60 where most misses were silly mistakes may sound reassuring, but it may actually mean you have an attention or fatigue problem. And a 60 where you got the diagnosis right but still picked the wrong answer may mean your issue is not knowledge. It may be clinical reasoning. This is the student I want to talk to most, because a lot of Step 1 students think, I knew that topic, so I'm fine. But knowing the topic is not the same as answering the question. You can recognize PCOS and still miss the treatment mechanism. You can recognize renal tubular acidosis and still miss the electrolyte pattern. And you can recognize shock and still miss what the question is actually asking you to do next. That is why simply rereading first aid or watching more videos does not always move the score. The NBME is not always asking, what is the diagnosis? Sometimes it is asking, what mechanism explains this? What is the next best step? What risk factor matters most? What lab findings should you expect? What drug targets the pathway? Or what detail changes the answer? If you stop at the diagnosis, you may feel like you understood the question, but you still missed what the NBME was testing. So here's the decision tree I would use if your exam is close. Question 1. What are your last 2 or 3 NBME scores doing? Are they rising, flat, or falling? If your scores are rising, even slowly, that is more reassuring. If your scores are flat, that means something about your process is not changing the outcome. And if your scores are falling, you need to ask whether this is fatigue, anxiety, poor review, or a real weakness being exposed. Do not ignore the trend. Question 2. What kind of misses are you making? Do not just write down the topic. Do not just say, I missed cardiology. That is too vague. Instead, classify the miss. Was it a knowledge gap? Did you simply not know the disease, drug, enzyme, pathology, or physiology? Was it a question task error? Did you know the diagnosis but miss what the question was actually asking? Was it a clue weighting error? Did you overvalue one detail and ignore the detail that should have decided the answer? Was it an answer choice trap? Did you pick something true but not relevant? Was it a stamina error? Did the mistakes increase later in the exam? Or was it a confidence error? Did you change correct answers because another option sounded more sophisticated? This is the review that matters, because each mistake type has a different fix. If it is a knowledge gap, you need targeted content, not random content, targeted. If it is a task error, you need to slow down at the final sentence and ask, what exactly are they asking me to produce? Diagnosis, mechanism, next step, risk factor, complication, lab finding? If it is an answer choice trap, you need to ask, why did the wrong answer feel attractive? Because that is where the learning is. Question 3. Are your misses clustered or scattered? Clustered misses are usually more fixable. If you are missing reproductive endocrine, renal physiology, and antimicrobial mechanisms over and over again, that gives you a target. You can make progress quickly because the problem has a shape. Scattered misses are harder. If every block has random errors across every system, the issue may be reasoning consistency, attention, pacing, or unstable recall. Question 4. Are you reviewing NBMEs like UWorld? This is a big one. UWorld is built to teach. It gives long explanations. It rewards deep mechanism building. NBME questions are different. They are often shorter. They often turn on fewer clues, and many of them are decided earlier than students realize. So if you review an NBME by reading every question like a UWorld teaching block, you can spend 8 hours reviewing and still not learn what you needed. For each missed NBME question, you should ask, what was the pivot clue? What was the task? Why was my answer tempting? What single detail should have moved me away from it? And what pattern do I need to recognize next time? That is the review loop that changes scores, not just, I'll read the explanation again. Now let's talk about whether you should postpone. I cannot tell you personally whether to sit or delay based on one score in a YouTube video, and no video should make that decision for you. But I can tell you what would make me more concerned. I would be more concerned if your last 2 or 3 NBMEs are not improving, or if you're still in the low to mid 50s close to exam day. If you cannot explain why you missed questions after review, or if you keep saying, I knew that, but your score is not moving, or if your misses are spread everywhere and you do not have a clear plan, those are all red flags. And I would also be concerned if you are so exhausted that your last NBME may not reflect your actual ability. On the other hand, I would feel more encouraged if your scores are trending upward. If your misses are clustered, if you can clearly name your mistake types, if your NBME review is becoming more precise, and if your next few days are focused on fixing the highest yield patterns instead of trying to relearn everything. So what should you do this week? Here is the simple plan. Pick one recent NBME. Review it deeply. Not all day, not passively, deeply. For every missed question, tag it by mistake type, knowledge gap, question task error, clue weighting error, answer choice trap, stamina or attention error. Then look for the pattern. If the same type of error appears again and again, that is your target. Next, make a short repair list. Not a giant list of every topic you dislike, a short list. For example, I need to review endocrine treatment mechanisms. I need to slow down on questions asking for next best step. I need to stop choosing true but irrelevant answers. I need to identify the pivot clue before reading the answer choices. Then, do focused practice around those patterns. Only after you have changed something about your process should you take another assessment. Because taking another NBME without changing your review process usually just gives you another version of the same problem. The goal is not to collect more scores. The goal is to change the reason behind the score. So if your NBME is 58, 59, 60, or 62 with 2 weeks left, do not panic, but also do not dismiss it. Treat it as data. Ask what kind of score it is. Ask whether the trend is improving. Ask what type of mistakes are holding you back. and ask whether your current review process is actually fixing those mistakes. Because in the final weeks, the students who improve are not always the ones who study the most. They are the ones who review the most honestly. They stop saying, "I knew that," and they start asking, "Why did I still miss it?" That question is where the score starts to move. If you found this video useful, please subscribe. We release new videos every week. If you're interested in learning more about the MD Steps platform, visit mdsteps.com for a free reasoning diagnostic. I'll drop the link for you in the description.